Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well this evening, and welcome back to tonight's second half. Before we jump into tonight's second half, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. My merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. Finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe, click that like button, and please leave a comment. It really does help, and guys, it definitely matters. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with tonight's second half, shall we? Today's first encounter. For the past 2 years, there has been a tapping sound coming from my bedroom window. It started one Halloween night. I know it sounds like a bad movie. And about a few times a month, sometimes more often, something taps at the window. There's nothing around to hit the window, and it sounds exactly like finger tapping on the glass. My siblings and I are used to it. Anyway, my brother started complaining that something was communicating to him from outside of the den's window. Keep in mind, we live in an apartment complex, so we always have our blinds closed. He says that whatever it is just keeps saying hello to him in a robotic, high-pitched voice. The rest of our family just shrugged it off. The day after, we go outside and there are small tracks leading to all of our windows. I don't know what animal could have made those tracks because I believe they are bipedal. Later that day, I was in my bedroom, lying down. Mind you, right next to the window, blinds are closed, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. Somebody was loudly banging on the glass. I tried to ignore it. I just assumed it was one of my siblings sneaking up to scare me. I then find out that they were both together at that moment in the house while it happened. They had not been out for a couple of hours prior. The next night, my brother complained about the voice outside of his window again. We told him just to ignore it because if it's something supernatural, we don't want to mess with it. While we were all preparing dinner, my entire family and I heard the creature scream outside. I was too shocked to move and grab my phone for recording. It kept yelling, "Help! Come out!" exactly how my brother had described it. It was so loud we could hear it clearly through the kitchen and dining room. We didn't want to look outside. Anyway, this morning more snow had fallen, and there were fresh prints everywhere. We live in Northeast Ohio. I don't know what to make of any of this, but it's impossible for this to be a prank because of the lack of human prints in the snow. Today's second encounter. So recently, my stepfather moved in with my mom and I at our house. We all went to clean out his old house, and I have a liking towards older vintage-looking furniture. Naturally, seeing an old antique mirror and a record player stand, I cleaned them up and excitedly packed them away. I put the mirror on my floor against the wall and procrastinated putting it up since I had no real equipment to put it up with, and God forbid I ask for help. So it had been on the floor for a couple of days. Let me clarify that I now live in a house right beside a highway in a poorer, more rural community. Homeless and crackheads are frequent, but never near my house, but always near my street. Prior to getting the mirror, my boyfriend, when he had stayed the night, had seen presumably a homeless man run across my backyard from the window as we were together. Weird things often occurred when I was alone or with him. Frequent banging outside the house or strange things would happen, causing my dog to bark or to cause alarm to my boyfriend and I, making us check each individual lock. Now, this next part is one of the most terrifying experiences I had ever had. One night, my eyes were fixated on this mirror. I fell asleep looking at it, even though I had left my TV on. And though cheesy, at 3:33 a.m., I was fully awoke to a black figure in a long coat and hat, standing directly at the foot of my bed, exactly where this mirror was. I looked at the time and I was horrified when the figure then proceeded to suffocate me with an invisible force. And though I could not make out a facial expression, I was certain it was smugly smiling. I watched the clock as this feeling lasted for 3 minutes until I looked over at a bear I had gotten when my grandfather passed. My grandmother, being religious, always told me to say scripture when I was in fear of the devil. However, not being religious and not reading too much of the Bible, I simply settled on repeating God is good and you are not real, and even begged my grandfather to help until it released the pressure and the figure vanished. Seeing the clock on the TV say 3:38 a.m., now I felt a breeze of comfort wash over me, strangely, and I soon slept peacefully. Strange things and noises often still happen, but never to that extent. Sometimes, when I ask my Google Home to play metal or a specific song, it will start playing strange old songs that are not even popular or ones I had ever even heard of. Even still, things feel somewhat strange, but nothing compared to that. Also, I am really into spooky aesthetic, which, in hindsight, buying a Ouija board may have been a huge mistake. However, I put it out in my room on display inside the box. I recently opened the box, and the Ouija board isn't even in it. I have no clue where it is, and it's honestly worrying me. However, I'm not looking for it. Today's third encounter. Ever since the age of 13, I've seen, heard, and felt things that are unexplainable more times than I can count. I have a family history of mental illness, and that could be the reason as to why I had those experiences. So when stuff like that happened, even though I was terrified, I would brush them off as hallucinations. I'm now on medication, and it's really helping me. And when I do have hallucinations, they are few and far between. However, this time in particular has me totally confused and thoroughly creeped out. I was 17 at the time. My family and I had just gotten back from a vacation really late. We had all agreed that a shower before going to bed would be very nice. My family is big. There are 12 in the family, and 8 of us are living in this house. I said I'd take the last shower because, well, I wanted to sit outside and get some alone time. The only light source was one of those street lamps to light up our driveway. Our house was about in the middle of nowhere. It had been about 15 minutes, and as time passed, an uneasy feeling started to creep into my stomach. I felt like it'd probably be a good idea to go inside, but when I heard the coyotes yipping and howling somewhere out in the field, I decided to stay out for a little longer, just to listen to them. That's when pure fear consumed everything in my body. Not even controlling my own body, I slowly looked over to the road. That's when I saw a 10-foot tall figure with elongated arms and legs and giant red eyes gliding down the road, about as fast as a slow-moving car. This thing was really, really thin, was standing completely straight up, and was hovering 1 or 2 foot about the road. I watched in horror as this thing passed by our house without a sound. The whole time I could not move. A couple of minutes later, I finally regained some control of my body and ran inside. I didn't tell anyone about it other than my doctor because I thought it was just another hallucination. A year later, I moved in with my sister and brother-in-law. Well, my brother-in-law and I were on a bike ride at about 11:30 at night talking about creepy experiences we've had. I started telling him about the Coyote Man, as that was the name I had given him. As I was explaining the features of this thing, his face grew more and more confused as I continued to talk. And just as I was going to talk about the big red eyes that this creature had, his face lit up. I asked him why he was making that face, and then he lifted his hands up to his eyes, making large circles with both of them. I started getting creeped out, and that's when he was like, "Big red eyes?" And I immediately started getting chills. He started to explain that when he was 19, he saw the same exact thing, and right before he saw it, he heard coyotes yipping and howling. I was freaked out at this point because I had never told anyone other than my doctor. I thought I was just seeing things. He continued to tell me that the thing actually chased him, and he said that he was absolutely terrified, and that it was the fastest he had ever run in his entire life. He said the only way to lose this thing was to climb atop of an old silo. He said that he was up there for the rest of the night, just waiting for this thing to show up again, but it never did. I got the chills for a minute at the end of what he told me. I have no idea what this thing was. I had never heard of anything like it. Every time we talk about an experience, I get a little more creeped out. Today's fourth encounter. The paranormal is fascinating. The knowledge of the occult is alluring. My older sister first introduced me to this dark world with Saturday night kid shows, and we continued our way up to shows like A Haunting and Celebrity Ghost Stories. She would take me to the Haunted Railroad or the Devil's Bridge. We walked a mile in the dark down a narrow road lined with willow trees. We listened for noises that didn't belong and watched the shadows around us. I thought we were brave. I thought we knew what to expect. My Nana passed away in the middle of my senior year of high school. In her passing, my family inherited some valuables and her Ouija board. My mom had an amalgamation of emotions around it. Sad nostalgia from her aunt, scared about communicating with spirits, and a slight ease that maybe she could tell my Nana goodbye. It took Mom a while to bring herself to, but she went and bought some candles and sage and some general stuff with a mystic vibe. She tried a session in a friend's bathroom, and they both lacked the will to push forward. Over the next year, the board would lie in a box under my mom's bed. We kids had forgotten and lived our lives for another year before our parents moved out and left us the house. My older sister took the master bedroom. She spent a few days clearing and cleaning and readying for her stuff. As she was finishing clearing under the bed, she found the box. Some time had passed, and my older sister, Jay, organized and gathered all her friends and myself. Quietly, she took out the box, displaying it to everyone before returning it to her room. We decided to go to the cul-de-sac in order to keep it out of our house. The 7 of us walked several blocks in silence down the dusty country road. The twilight hours had begun. The air was quiet and still. The day's heat still stuck to the night. Warmth emanated from the ground. We passed dark, decrepit houses, surrounded by thick foliage, tall oak, thorny bushes, and cactus. The walk alone was enough to scare some of the group. Dogs barked in the background down the hill. The loudest sound was the crunch of the gravel we walked on. In this dead end there is no pavement. It had all chipped away many years prior, just rock and pebbles. In a large open circle surrounded by dense southern woods, a small dirt road laying tangent to the cul-de-sac marked the exit, making it easy to lose in the disorienting darkness. We arrived and sat in a circle around the box, fashioning our phone lights around to light the box. Jay prepared the area using the box as a stand and spacing us out evenly, 3 at each end, and 1 person to record any kind of response we got. The darkness was thick with overcast covering the moon and stars. It was truly black. We began each of the 6 lending a hand to the planchette, consolidating our energy by moving it around the board in 3 large circles before asking for an audience. Hello, is anyone there? Time inched forward as we waited, growing impatient and discouraged. Again, we circled the board, and Jay asked once more. If you can hear me, move to yes. My hair is raised as I write this. We watched in horror as the wooden dial slowly moved. A twitch of our collective muscles, perhaps? Before we could question each other, it shot to the answer, no. Jay tried a different approach, asking it directly, do you have a name? It performed a small, slow circle, landing back to no. Jay asked further, what is your name? No, no, it replied, circling both times. What do I call you? It failed to respond. Waiting a few moments, Jay started, but it began to move as if to interrupt, quicker this time. It guided over the letters Z-O, 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 Z-O. Scared, Jay threw her hand to the piece and said goodbye before moving it to the bottom of the board. We decided this was time to go somewhere else, less secluded. The next location is a story all on its own, and that's for another day. Now, before we get into the last experience of the night, I'd kind of like to touch on something that we had just mentioned, or I had just mentioned in this last experience. Zozo, the Ouija board demon. Sometimes when I hear encounters or experiences of Ouija boards and they mention Zozo, I have a hard time believing when they mention that because of the popularity, I guess, of Zozo with TV and movies and stuff. But the experience that I had with two of my cousins and a friend, I have never forgotten, and it changed my life. And it happened before my 1994 Dogman experience. Quite possibly could have been a reason for it. The majority of my teenage years, or young teenage years, were spent at my family's auction farm. My cousins, we all just, we worked down there during the day. It was an auction farm, so we had to feed the cows, the pigs, do a lot of just work. And at night, we had fun. We rode our wheelers. We had a field car. My older cousin had a 1978 Camaro with a 400 small block in it that just ripped ass. And we'd go race other cars in that. And, we would play with the Ouija board. We got obsessed with the Ouija board for a while. I went to this farm, and there's a video when I went down there with some ghost hunting equipment, actually, just a couple months ago. So we used to play in the barn with the Ouija next to these sow pens. Now, we called them sow pens because we'd put the pregnant sows in there, and they'd give birth. So for like a month, we played next to this one pen. It was a centrally located spot in the barn. It was away from the doors, so there was no draft or anything right where we were playing. And this, I'll never forget, it was a black sow was in there. And for we always played in this one spot, but we had to move her in there. And we must have been there for a week before she gave birth. And all the piglets were born dead. And one night, we were playing, and everything went wrong that night. Prior to it was kind of fun, it was just a fun little thing. It'd tell us we were talking to random people. And one night, just kind of all hell broke loose. Plastic at the end of the barn door looked like there was a face of a demon. I was in the hayloft, and something chased me through the hayloft, and I had to fall. I literally fell through the chute door onto 7 feet onto a cement floor. And my cousins and friends all saw this hand come out we were playing and it kept saying, we asked who we were talking to. And it said OZ, 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 OZ. It didn't say ZO. It said OZ. And we, being teenagers of the 90s, we listened to like Slayer and Dio and, just metal. We were friggin' metal kids. And of course, OZ, OZ, we were like, are we talking to Ozzy? Just being dummies. And it ended up, the board told us we were going to die and we would see Hounds of Hell. My 2 cousins are dead. They saw Hounds of Hell. Mel saw one in his dream, along with Nick, our friend, who is he's spiritually and emotionally dead. I was diagnosed with a terminal illness and almost died. By God's love and grace, I didn't. And I saw a Dogman. So there was my Hound of Hell. I truly believe that name isn't just a name to be thrown out to make your Ouija story scarier, but it's there. This is before anyone was talking about Zozo. We thought we were honestly, we know Ozzy spelled O-Z-Z-Y, but we were just being kids, but when I first heard of Zozo, I went back to that night and realized, oh my God, that's who we were talking to. It wanted to kill us. And almost successfully killed all 4 of us. Like, I'm on the mend. I'm on still have my illness, but I'll manage it with medication. And our friend Nick is spiritually and mentally dead to this day. Lost. So these things are not to be trifled with. And if honestly that Zozo is real, because I don't know, maybe it's just a name it uses, but if it is real, it's definitely not something to take lightly. And if you do use a Ouija board, be careful, be safe. Don't use open-ended questions. Don't invite it into you. Have holy water with you. Pray first and after. Say goodbye. This is a very hard topic to speak about because my cousins were both great guys, and one of them was like my older brother. I loved the guy. He was amazing. And he died one of the most horriblest ways ever. He was crushed to death. So I really, truly believe these demonic spirits that come from Ouija boards are real. Let's get on to the next encounter. And tonight's final experience. A little background on me and the day. I work in real estate, more exactly commercial real estate. So my work takes me all over the place, from urban industrial areas to very off the beaten path secluded areas. farmland, development land, etc. On this day in particular, in October of 2012, my last assignment of the day was to go out and survey an old farmstead near Cayuga in Haldimand County, about 30 miles south of Hamilton, Ontario. The place had been vacant since the 90s. I arrived in the late afternoon, 5:30ish, I'd say. The place was the last one on a dead-end country road. Couldn't be seen from the road. I went up the long driveway and proceeded to do my look-over. There were 3 structures, a house, a garage, and a large tool shed. I walked around the front of the house, which was completely boarded up and with no means of seeing in. I proceeded around to the front side of the toward the other buildings. The shed had basically fallen completely down, but the garage was mostly still intact. I noticed around the side main door large scratches on the door. It was half broken down, but still held shut by a padlock on one side and the middle and upper hinge. The bottom part was forced inward, and the door and clapboards around it were covered in these scratches. But not like scratches a dog would leave. These scratches were huge and parallel, but spread apart almost like fingernail scratches, and very deep, obviously put there with a lot of force and pressure. That's when I looked down and saw huge paw prints, but not regular round paw prints, almost elongated a bit. The area around this partially broken down door was covered with these paw prints. If I had to venture a guess at how wide they were, I would say at least 5 inches. I was wearing heeled dress boots, and when I put my foot over the paw print, I could see the print on either side of my foot. I wear a size 11. So, I don't have tiny feet by any means. I began to get very uneasy, and that's when I recall noticing that all the sounds in the forest were gone. It was dead silent. And that's when I noticed the stench, like a wet dog, urine, and feces. I mean, the whole area just smelled rotten, like a swamp, rot and decay, but this smell was strong and putrid. I got very uneasy, like all of a sudden I knew I was not alone, and decided I'd seen enough and quickly headed back to the car. That is when I heard something in the brush, and it sounded large. It was going through the trees quickly and hard. I got back to my car and locked the doors. When I started my car and turned on the lights, that's when I caught an eye shine in the trees ahead of me. But the eye shine was not at level of a dog's head. It was a lot higher, I'd say 4 to 5 feet up, maybe a bit higher. I couldn't make out a shape as it was getting on towards dusk, and there were a lot of shadows in the trees, but I thought I saw a large figure in the trees. I don't really know if I'm sure of that, but I started to freak out just a little and decided it was time to go, so I backed around right into a wet marsh spot and kind of got my car stuck. I was more interested in watching this thing than where I was going, which was a mistake. My attention quickly went back to the car as I tried to free myself from the mud. When I looked back to where this thing was, it was gone. The spot it was I could see further into the trees, so there was definitely something there, but I could not see exactly a shape, more so just a large shadowy figure. After a couple of seconds of rocking the car back and forth, I managed to get it out and I left quickly. I don't think I've ever been so scared in my life. Like I said, I did not clearly see what it was, but I just had an intense feeling of evil. Something bad was there. I returned to that spot a year and a half after the incident. The place is gone. Someone bought the property and tore it all down, cut down a lot of the trees, but to the best of my knowledge, nothing has been developed there. It's still just vacant land. I've not really told anyone of this, as I didn't want to be ridiculed or made fun of. A coworker said it was probably a bear, but I know for a fact there are no bears this far south in Ontario unless it's in a zoo. I had forgotten about this until recently I saw a YouTube video about someone's encounter with something very similar to what I just described. I handled the sale of some farmland on a nearby property to a place I experienced, a Six Nations Indian reservation. The client was one of the few remaining pureblood natives. I'd put him easily at 80, if not older. I asked him about odd happenings in the area, like strange animals, and I sort of told him my experience, not in detail, just that I was on that property, and he responded with a question. You saw it, didn't you? He went on to say there are many things that are unknown in this world, but wouldn't comment further about my experience, only said there is a good reason that particular place has sat empty and unused for decades. I had an odd nightmare of that day about a year afterward, and I am still very hesitant to do surveys in areas like that.
What a great collection of horrifying encounters. You know, that one at the end is just imagine you're going to check out a property, appraise it, whatever, just look at it, and you see evidence of something abnormally dangerous, abnormally not of this world. Something just of nightmares. And then it makes itself known. No, thank you. Anyway, I'd like to thank you all for all your support. May the Great Spirit watch over us all. May He guide us down that path that we call life. Please, everyone, stay safe and stay healthy.